They tried to hide it. They tried to erase it. They tried to silence it. But history has a power that can never be buried forever. And even when memory is suffocated by fear, blood always finds a way to speak. Tonight, we walk into one of the darkest, least told chapters of slavery in the Americas, a revolt that rose from silence, a rebellion that echoed in the heart of America, but one that history books chose to forget. This is not the version you learned in school, not the clean, controlled, polished narrative. This is the raw version, dark, violent, and at the same time, filled with courage, fire, and hope. This is the slave revolt America never told you about. The 19th century. The Americas still trembled in the aftershocks of revolutions. Nations proclaimed independence, waving their flags of liberty, of freedom, of future. But behind the banners, millions of people remained in chains. Men and women torn from Africa, transported across oceans in floating coffins called slave ships, sold in markets as if they were animals, forced to work until their bodies collapsed, feeding with their suffering the empires that dare to call themselves civilized. The United States called itself the land of opportunity, the land of dreams. But behind the white columns of plantation houses, behind the endless green fields that sustained entire economies, there were muffled screams, chains dragging on the ground, bodies marked by the whip, and minds that, even enslaved, never stopped dreaming of freedom. It was here, in this contradiction, that the seeds of revolt began to grow, because while America exalted freedom, while it declared all men are created equal, those words were never meant for everyone, not for the dark-skinned, not for those who carried chains, not for those reduced property to numbers, to merchandise. The hypocrisy was brutal, a nation born on the promise of liberty, built upon the foundation of slavery. And from that contradiction came poison and also hope, because where there's oppression, there's always resistance. Where there is silence imposed, there are always voices waiting to explode. Imagine waking before dawn, not by choice, but because a whip cracked across someone's back beside you. Imagine working under the burning sun, hands bleeding, body breaking, knowing there will be no rest, no pause, no tomorrow. Imagine returning at night to a dark cabin, dirt floor beneath you, crowded with dozens of others, the air heavy with hunger. Imagine carrying chains not only on your feet, but on your soul. This was the daily life of the enslaved, a life of pain, but also of survival, because survival itself was resistance. To sing, even when forbidden, was resistance. To pray in African tongues, even under the suspicious gaze of the master, was resistance. To tell stories, to pass down secrets, to hide codes and songs. These were the weapons of the silenced. And in this everyday silence, something began to grow. A whisper, an idea, an uncontrollable desire. Revolt. The masters sensed it. They were haunted by it. Though they held the power, they lived in fear. They knew that at any moment, the balance could tip. In many regions, the enslaved outnumbered the free. All it would take was one spark. That spark had a name. Haiti. The Haitian Revolution was the nightmare of every slaveholder in the Americas. The enslaved of Haiti had risen up, destroyed empires, defeated armies, and built a free nation. It was proof that slavery could be shattered, proof that chains could be broken, proof that the enslaved could become free. And so, Haiti was not only a beacon, it was a ghost. It haunted every plantation owner, every overseer, every government built on slavery. The masters responded with more violence, with fear as a weapon, with public punishments meant to terrify, whippings until flesh tore, hangings in the town square, heads displayed on poles as warnings. But fear, no matter how strong, cannot last forever. Fear transforms. Fear turns into anger, and anger, when shared, turns into courage. The courage spread in whispers, in glances exchanged across the fields, in hidden meetings under the moonless night, in songs that seemed harmless, but carried messages. No one knows the exact moment when the decision was made. There was no announcement, no decree, only a murmur that grew into a roar. We will no longer live in chains. The plan took shape in shadows. Who would strike first? where the fire would be lit. What word would be the secret signal? It was no longer just survival. It was defiance. It was the birth of collective hope. The night came. Clouds hid the moon. The air was heavy. The plantation seemed calm. The masters slept soundly, believing the chains still held. But in the cabins, no one slept. Hearts pounded like drums. Hands gripped tools turned into weapons. Eyes gleamed in the darkness. And then, fire. A small flame, hidden at first, then larger, then unstoppable. The fire leapt to the dry wood, rising into the night sky, painting it in red and orange. The fire was not just destruction. It was a message. It was a cry. It was a signal. The enslaved rose. Chains broke. Doors were shattered. And a single word roared across the night. Freedom. Not in one tongue, but in many. In African languages remembered through generations, mixed with English, French, Portuguese. A chorus of rebellion. A chorus that shook the earth. The masters awoke in terror. Some reached for weapons. Others froze, paralyzed, realizing that the nightmare they had feared had finally arrived. The revolt spread like wildfire. Torches lit the night. Weapons were improvised. Knives stolen from kitchens, hoes and sickles turned into swords, stones hurled with fury. Every blow struck was not just violence. It was centuries of pain compressed into a single act of vengeance. The enslaved fought not only for survival, but for dignity. Men, women, children, everyone took part. Women carried torches, wielded blades, led war chants. Children acted as messengers, warning of enemy movements. The revolt was not a few, it was a people. For hours, the night belonged to them. The fields burned. The houses trembled. The masters ran, their world collapsing before their eyes. But dawn brought the sound they feared most. Hoes, militias, armed men summoned to restore order. They came with rifles, with steel, with the blessing of the state. They did not come to negotiate. They came to annihilate. The revolt met bullets, gunpowder against torches, rifles against hoes, discipline against desperation. It was no battle. It was slaughter. Bodies fell in the fields, covering the land in blood and ash. Men cut down where they stood. Women dragged through the dirt. Children seized, used as examples of what awaited anyone who dared resist. Those captured alive faced horrors even worse. Public executions were staged. Gallows erected. Bodies hung in the open air, swaying like grotesque warnings. Others were whipped until their flesh tore apart, branded with hot irons, or decapitated, their heads displayed at the entrances of plantations. It was not only punishment, it was theater, the theater of terror. And then the silence. The revolt was crushed, the survivors forced back into chains. But the memory lingered. The masters decreed silence. No one would write of it, no one would teach it, no one would honor it. Official records reduced it to disturbances. Journals called it savagery. Never resistance, never freedom. The revolt was erased from history books, erased from classrooms, erased from national memory. But memory is not so easily destroyed. It survived in whispers, in songs sung in the fields, in prayers muttered in the dark, in stories passed from grandmother to grandchild. The revolt lived on, not in ink, but in blood, in silence, in hidden remembrance. The enslaved who fought knew the risk. They knew death was almost certain, and yet they rose, because life in chains was worse than death and rebellion, and that truth could not be erased. Centuries later, the land has changed. Plantations turned to ruins. Cabins collapsed, but the ghosts remain. They walk beneath city streets. They rest in forgotten cemeteries. They live in the inequalities that persist, in the wounds that never healed. The revolt America never told you about is not gone. It is here in the silence, in the shadows, in the unresolved weight of history. And its moral is clear. Slavery was never accepted in silence. It was always resisted. Freedom was never a gift. It was always fought for, always paid for in blood. They tried to erase it. They tried to bury it. But tonight, by telling it, we defy that silence. We return voices to the voiceless. we break the chains of memory. If this story touched you, do not let it be silence again. Share it, comment, subscribe. Join us in remembering the forgotten, in uncovering the hidden, in breaking the silence they tried to impose. Because history is not only what is written in books. History is also what was torn out, erased, denied, and our duty is to bring it back. The slave revolt America never told you did not die. It lives. It lives in memory. It lives in us, and it will live as long as there is someone willing to remember